Hi, everyone, and welcome to Happy Not Satisfied. My name is Dan Morrison, and I'm the founder of Happy Not Satisfied and the host of this podcast. Today, I have an incredibly special guest, someone that I got to know is actually a leader. He was my boss when I was a high school band director at Ronald Reagan High School. I looked to him as a role model and a mentor. He was actually a parent of one of my students. And I think most important of all, I look to him now as a great friend. He also happens to be the superintendent of one of the largest school districts in Texas, the Northeast Independent School District, that was just named a Forbes top place to work, which I think is a huge deal. Last I checked, the number of students in the district was like 67,000, 4,500 teachers, 8,000 staff. So it's a serious operation. And like I said, I am so thrilled to welcome Dr. Sean Maika to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dan. It's great to see you again.
It is so great to see you too. Thank you. And so I think we have a lot in common, and I think we have a lot to talk about related to Happy Not Satisfied and creating your own luck. But before we jump in with that, I think it would be really interesting to hear a little bit about what a school superintendent, especially on the scale that we're talking about, does.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. And, I get that asked of me often, especially when I go and visit our campuses with the young kids, and they see me in my suit and always think that I'm the Secret Service. But a superintendent really, in a lot of ways, is like a CEO. As you described, I have almost 8,500 employees, 60,000 students, and then, of course, I'm serving the community of several hundred thousand parents and community members. So really what I'm doing is overseeing a very large business. Our annual budget is about $574 million a year. And I'm making certain that we are delivering to our community what it is that they expect of us. So making certain that we deliver high quality programs, that we're academics are focused on, that we're not just looking at today's issues, but really looking forward and trying to envision what are the skills that are needed, in 5 or 10 years from now. And we're really charged in education today, I believe, in preparing students to enter a workforce that we're not even really sure what jobs are going to be there. And so it's really looking at, and I think I will sum it up like this, our challenge in education now, and what I've been super focused on as the superintendent, are what I call power skills. We've heard a lot of people talk about them as soft skills, but they're power skills. It's those pieces of looking at each other and having a conversation, learning to disagree, but have a good conversation about it, shaking people's hands, looking them in the eye, all of those things, showing up on time. As I talk to business leaders, those are things that they're struggling. And so as we're looking at being innovative here in Northeast, we're building these new programs, and we have an intense focus on those power skills and equipping our students to enter a world that we're not even sure what it'll look like when they get out.
Absolutely. And I love that you reframe that as power skills, because I couldn't agree more. And honestly, as you know, I'm in my second year of business school, and I cannot tell you how often we hear that those are the skills that matter by far and away the most. And to hear that, a public education system is focusing on that, I think is such a great sign for the future. So thank you for having that vision. I think that's incredible. So, as I said when we talked earlier, and kind of the thread of this podcast is talking about times where successful people from all across different industries created their own luck. And I think that what we see from other people is the tip of the iceberg, but the whole rest of the iceberg underneath is what I think is really interesting. And I think we lose that a lot. It's easy to think, well, that person got that opportunity and it was lucky, and they have no idea what might have gone into that or what definitely did go into that. So all that being said, I would love to jump off here and maybe hear about a time where you can relate to that, where you feel like maybe you created your own luck in a situation.
Yeah. So, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people misunderstand about me. They see the suit, they see this person that seems so well put together, and I don't think they realize really how I got here. So, I grew up in a town of 100 people in a very rural town in Canada. And really, Dan, nobody ever spoke to me about going to college. In fact, where I grew up, the thing you did was you learned a trade and you entered, building construction or something like that. And so one day, and I don't, I guess it was luck, but I was working at my uncle's gas station, and I was 14 years old. I was just about to start being a freshman in high school. And I met a man who is now my father-in-law. But I was at the gas station, and he pulled in, and he was from the US. And he asked me to pump his fuel, but he needed to have this gas mixed at a certain ratio. And so he did not understand the metric system. And so I quickly took what he wanted to do and recalculated in my head and said, okay, well, we need this much oil. And I put it in. Well, 2 weeks later, I met my wife and didn't even know that he was connected to her. And so I'll fast forward, Dan, 4 years later when I graduated high school, and again, was not even thinking about going to college. He said, hey, why don't you move to Texas and go to school? Have you ever thought about that? And quite frankly, I never had. And so after some discussion and he convinced me, hey, give this a shot. And so my daughter, who you had that you mentioned, is now a freshman up at College Station. And we moved her, and we had a ton of stuff. And I looked at her and I said, do you see that one suitcase? It was about maybe 24 inches long and 18 inches wide. I said, that's everything that I owned when I moved to Texas. It all fit in that one bag. And so I really jumped in, not really understanding, and moved to Texas when I was 19 years old. Did not have the best high school experience. I know you were a high school guy, but that was not my cup of tea. But got into college, and man, I thrived in it. I loved the independence. I loved being able to explore interests and those types of things. And so was not really going to be an educator. But went into the very first classroom on some assignment from my college and fell in love with it, and really started to understand that this was my passion. And so both my parents owned their own business. My mother owned a restaurant for 40 years. My dad's owned an excavation company well over 50 now. So I watched leaders. So when I entered it, I always said, one day I'm going to be the superintendent. That's where I want to be. And so in 1995, which was my very first teaching job, I crossed the threshold of Lakeland Elementary in Louisville ISD. And my principal said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'm going to be a superintendent. And so, Dan, the thing is that, people talk things about luck. And I just think it's about, you have to prepare for that moment when it's there. I got my doctorate in 2007, long before I ever wanted to be a superintendent. But what I was always thinking about was that future moment, that when that opportunity arose, was I going to be prepared? Was I going to be ready to step in? How did I need to go about it? So as a principal, as an assistant principal, even as a teacher, I would attend board meetings and watch and observe and watch these interactions, even though they weren't mine to have or to be involved in. It was constantly the study of people and how the system worked and how it didn't. And so, when you were here with us in Northeast, I was an executive director of school administration when Brian Gotardy, the superintendent, called me up to say, hey, you're going to be an assistant superintendent. And he laughs to this day because he said he's never seen me speechless because I wasn't even looking for the job. But he said, look, I've seen your body of work. I know what you're capable of. You have the credentials. I think you'd be a great asset. So he brought me up, and lo and behold, 18 months later, he announces his retirement. And, but at that point, I had done the work and I had put in the effort that when that moment arose, I was ready to step in it. Now, it was never a given and I had to walk in, but because of all that time I had prepared, coming up to the 24 years in education, knowing where I wanted to be, when that moment arose, I stepped in it and was ready to take it on. Now, I had a 6-month interview. I mean, they hired me as an interim, so I had to demonstrate that I knew what I was doing. But it was all that work, all those years that really prepared me for that moment, that once I had it, I was ready. Because I can tell you, before I moved back to Northeast, I'd actually interviewed for a superintendency and was their runner-up. Didn't get the job, and quite frankly, it was the best thing that ever happened. Because what it allowed me to do is step back and realize, there are just some things I still need to learn. And I used it as that growth opportunity to really move forward and focus myself on some key things that I still needed to learn.
That's an incredible story. I mean, just from top to bottom, and thank you for sharing that. I would be curious. I love the fact that you were going to board meetings just to check it out and learn from it. I don't think anyone would ever assume that that's a thing someone would do, but it makes a lot of sense if you have that goal in mind, you need to learn about that. Are there any other specific things that you did along the way that you feel like really prepared you for when that opportunity arose, that you were ready to sort of seize that moment?
Yeah, but Dan, I don't think it's the traditional things that people would think about. I think one of the pieces that really helped me prepare for the moment was something that happened when I was a teacher. So I was at a school. I had moved over to go work for a principal in this school district, actually. And that summer, as I was moving in, he let me know that he was moving to another school and this lady was taking over. And so he was a beloved principal. People loved him. And so this lady really did have a tough job. Well, that year, I really kind of got to know her, and I had finished up my master's. I was ready to be an assistant principal. And so all along, she was like, "You're so ready. You need to do this." Well, her assistant principal left, and she goes, "This is it. You're going to be it. Just apply," so forth and so on. So I applied. And the interview happened, and I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear anything. Several weeks later, I was up at the school, and because it was in the summer, and she called me into her office to let me know that I didn't get the job, that she had hired somebody different. And I say this, Dan, because I think true character shines through when you don't get what you want. And I had to go home and really think about, because she had all but told me I was going to be it, and didn't really elaborate on what happened, what was wrong, what didn't. And so I had a decision at that moment. Do I come back and am I bitter and am I angry? Or do I come back and do everything in my power to help whoever she hired be successful? Well, I chose the latter. And I worked with that person side by side to help them be successful. The reason I say all of this, Dan, fast forward, that lady was Donna Newman, who was the associate superintendent in Northeast, who I eventually worked for as a principal, as an executive director, and then I became her boss as the superintendent. And we reflect back on that because, people say you are when nobody's looking, right? No, you're something every day. Somebody's always watching. I think what people forget is the interview is every day. Everything you do and say tells people about you. And at that moment, I just, we've chuckled off and on and told that story many times, because I don't think she ever would have hired me back had I chose to be bitter and angry. And I learned so much through that, because it's easy to be happy and be nice when it's going your way. But when it's not, it's tough. But that's where true character really, shines through. And so it were things like that. I think what prepared me the most, Dan, for this role is when things didn't work out, and where I had to dig deep inside of me and figure out who was I? What did I really stand for as a person? Because I've had a saying forever: if you stand for nothing, you are nothing. And people, as a leader, you've got to articulate what are the non-negotiables and what are the expectations. And you have to paint them so clearly that people all either say, I'm on board and I want to be a part of your team, or, you know what, this isn't for me and I'm just going to get off. So those are those things that really, in my mind, helped me realize who the leader I wanted to be, who I was, who I aspired to be, and that understanding that you're always being watched from everybody. So in this role, I'm sending out a video every single week. I'm on a local news and so forth. And so who they see is the exact same person that I am. I'm not any different. This is just the person that I am. I always love it when I ran in. The most recent was I was at a parts store buying a part for my son, and a gentleman walked over and he goes, man, I love to see the brass being out like a normal person. And I said, but I am a normal person. Yeah. He goes, I know, but it's just so neat to see you in a parts store like I am.
Yeah.
And I said, well, but I'm just like you. I'm a dad out doing things for a son, just like what you're in here doing. Right. And then we have a great conversation as two dads.
That's amazing. I mean, there's so many things in there that are so great. I very much relate to how you're talking about rejection. I mean, I've over the last few years faced a pretty significant amount of it, to be honest, in a lot of different ways, whether it's being denied from schools or denied from internships or everything in between. And it's easy in those moments to feel like you either want to give up or you want to be bitter about it or you want to complain about why it's not fair. And maybe it's not fair, but at the end of the day, if you choose sort of the route that you're talking about, there can be some pretty incredible outcomes, because that's the stuff that sort of defines you and can make you tough and resilient and ultimately succeed. And I think it's easy to lose sight of that. And it's easy to think someone like you, who is the superintendent of this incredibly successful school district, doing, what you set out to do. I think it would be easy for someone who doesn't know you or doesn't know these stories to think, well, that guy just got every step of the way and now he's the superintendent. And that's obviously not the case, So thank you for sharing that, because I think these types of stories are so important for people to hear, to stay on track, to stay inspired, to stay consistent and disciplined, even when, and especially when it's really difficult to do that. That's really cool. So thank you.
Yeah.
I would, I'd like to pivot just a little bit and talk about a couple of different sort of ideas, concepts, I guess, that I like to think about a lot. And one of them is this whole thought of kind of, I'll be happy once and I know you and I have talked about it a little bit, but I struggle personally, and I talk about this a lot with this. And when I was a band director, I did too. And I finally kind of figured out how to reframe some things for myself. But basically, it's like, I'll be happy once this thing is over, or I accomplish this thing, or whatever. It's like, you're not giving yourself permission to feel joy until, and then you lose out on the entire process where most of your life is spent. And so I would love to know if you relate to that at all, if you have any thoughts on that, if you've lived through that, like how you found within yourself maybe how to work through that.
Yeah. So Dan, I'm gonna pivot to sports.
Okay.
To give you this example. So in my 20s, I decided to start playing golf. And my wife would tell you that once I make a decision, I'm all in. Like once it is, I'm there. Yep. It's all in. So for 2 years, I never went and played a round of golf. I sat at a driving range learning how to hit balls. So fast forward several years later, I became a scratch golfer, and I taught myself how to do it. Well, that's great and it's bad all at the same time, Dan, because the people that I was playing with, I won every single time. So success, if I would have judged it, well, I was successful. The problem was, if I would have used that as my marker, was I ever really getting better? And so what I subscribed to back then, do you play golf by chance?
I do. I'm not a scratch golfer, but I do play golf.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question, Dan.
Sure.
What is the perfect round of golf?
To me, the perfect round of golf is enjoying yourself outside and maybe you hit a few good shots.
Okay. What's a perfect round of golf and score?
18.
Correct. Dan, it's 18.
Yeah.
And see, for a lot of people, they're like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
And I said, but see, I never believed that, because best isn't a destination. You don't get to best and stop.
Right.
I said, so if I used all these people that I was playing with, in my head, I could have said, well, I'm the best, except I'm not. There were always places that I could have shaved a stroke or hit this better or that better. So in my head, I just said, I got to get to 18. Now, look, is that realistic? Probably not. Was I ever going to make it, or will I ever get there, or has it ever been done? No. But the belief, Dan, of always trying to get somewhere, and that belief of you're never going to be there, it's always a little bit of improvement, kept me motivated to keep working forward. And so I quit golf. Literally, once I was out because I had a daughter and started my doctorate. Well, 18 years later, I picked it up a year ago, and I have my handicap down to a 3 handicap, all with that same mindset again of it. And again, I'm playing with people that I win all the time against, but it's that vision of I can't ever be satisfied. I can celebrate it. I can say that was really good, but golly, if I would have done just this little bit, I could have gotten a little bit better. And it's not negative self-talk. It's never spun that way. It's like, that was really good. And wow, you shot a 1 under today. And for that course, that was an excellent, but you know what? Had you made those 2 putts, and what they had in common was they were both 15 feet away. They both broke to the left. And you know what? You probably need to work on that just a little bit on getting that. And that just keeps me motivated. And it's that piece of believing that my best is yet to come, that I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
So, for a lot of people, they think, well, the pinnacle of my career is Northeast as the superintendent. I'm the 11th or 12th largest district in the state. And there's over 1,100 school districts. Well, it might be the pinnacle, but it might not be. And I don't know what next year or next month or in 2 years from now will hold. And so if I celebrate and say, well, this is it, but then I might miss that opportunity that comes along that may not feel like or seem like that great thing, but really is a great thing. Because, coming back to Northeast, I made a lateral move, principal to principal. It was the best thing I ever did, because while it was lateral, it'll put me on a path that I never could have seen back then. So I think people just think if I get here, then I'll be happy.
Mm-hmm.
But they find when they're there, it's like, but that didn't make me feel happy, because happiness isn't about something. It's this inner drive within you it's about you being happy with you and constantly feeling that need to improve. Dan, I don't know if you've ever read much change research, but change is actually hardwired in us all. Mm. And everybody has a change clock that's different. Some people, for change, it's 20 years. For some people like me, it's fast. It needs to happen, or I get restless and I get bored. And that piece to it, right, is I think that's why it's different for everybody, because some people can be okay being where they're at for a long period of time, but then something happens within their psyche that says, I need something different. For me, it's that constant. I'm constantly in search of what's going to excite me now, and what can I dig my teeth in, and what isn't happening, or how can we make this better? That's that constant drive for me to just get like Lego, Dan. I don't know if I shared this with you, but people don't understand that the Lego block almost didn't happen. Now just imagine a world without Legos. I mean, the fascinating thing is when Lego invented the block in the 50s, if you found a block from the 50s and used today's block, they'll still work exactly together. The problem was, when they first invented it, is they didn't interlock. They wouldn't snap together. But right before they almost abandoned it, one engineer made a 0.1 millimeter difference. That's the thickness of a piece of paper. And that created the interlocking block. See, I think we think that we need something huge, and sometimes it's that little 0.1 millimeter difference that can send an excitement or do something different that pushes us in this new kind of exciting way.
Yeah, I mean, agreed on all points for sure. I'd be curious because definitely relate to you 100% on so much of what you're saying. And this, I definitely hear the like the not satisfied part and always wanting to get better. And I think I know the answer to this, but do you see the happy part of that too? Like, are you finding joy in that sort of lack of satisfaction in the process of improving? And what does that feel like to you?
Yeah, I think that's what keeps me motivated.
Yeah.
Dan. I mean, that is the happiness where I'm the least satisfied is when I'm stagnant,
Mm-hmm.
when I don't feel things are changing and evolving or improving. And so I find happiness in where I've gotten. I always, in the 41 largest districts in the state, we tied for 7th on our accountability scores. Was I happy? Absolutely. Did I celebrate? 100%. And then it became, so now what's next?
Yeah.
Because that's what keeps me motivated and excited to come to work every day.
It reminds me, one of my favorite books is called Shoe Dog. It's the story of Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, and basically his phrase through the whole thing is grow or die. And it's so simple, but it's like, I very much related to that. And I think it's kind of exactly what you're talking about too, with this entire mindset. It's really, I mean, it seems like you just embody it to a T, which is really inspiring and really cool to hear. If you ever do shoot an 18, please, I think it'll go viral. I think it'll become world famous, but let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
have you ever had a hole in one?
I have not.
Wow.
I've come very close several times, but
I haven't either. So.
but you know what? Here's the deal. So if I get one, great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But okay.
Right. Perfect example, right?
But that one hole, if I shoot a hole in one, but I shoot 18 over on the rest of it, what does that see? And that's, I guess, my point is that when we create this feeling of that it's my happiness is at a destination.
Yes, exactly.
Then I think we set ourselves up for failure
100%.
Because it's like, once I get there, so now what? Where am I going to go now? And that I always say it to my staff, I'm restlessly dissatisfied. I'm just restlessly dissatisfied. Not that I'm unhappy. It's just like, I think if we could just do this, I bet you we could make some amazing things happen. And that's really how the mindset that we took in with dealing with COVID was that mindset.
I can only imagine. And like, speaking of that, another idea that I wanted to touch on with you is this whole different doesn't mean worse. And I think the COVID situation was that, and it had to be. And I would be curious, I'm sure we could talk for hours about what went into that whole thing and the outcomes and all of it. But if there's anything related to that idea and how you guys pivoted and made that all happen, and maybe some good outcomes that you weren't expecting, I would love to hear about that.
Yeah. I think what education doesn't get enough credit for is that we had 7 days to recreate business. Yep. And I would love any other business in the world to forget everything that they've done and in 7 days reinvent themselves and do it, right? But educators did it. They're incredible. They're the MacGyvers of the world, our teachers. You can give them a piece of chewing gum, a toothpick, a paper clip, and an old bowl, and suddenly you have a car that's driving everywhere. That's just what teachers do. They are incredible. With COVID, I think what you saw are two different kind of approaches to it. I think some people said, I can't believe, why is this happening to me? And then I think you had other people that said, hey, you know what? This may be an opportunity to do things uniquely different. Well, that's how we approached it. When, I can remember it was our spring break, and my wife and I and my kids were just getting loaded up to take our fifth wheel to go camping, when I got a call from the president of UTSA to say we're shutting down. And I looked at my wife and I said, it's over. This is. And so by the time we got to our destination, I never came out of that trailer. I was on Zooms and everything because A day later, we were shutting schools. And then, we had to reinvent ourselves by then. And so what I did, Dan, and really how I approached my folks, my executive staff, so at the time they were called associate superintendents, we showed up on a Sunday right before we were to come back to talk to principals. And I said, look, y'all, I know that this is scary, and I know nobody knows how this is going to work because none of us could have imagined this. But what a unique opportunity to do things different, because the way that it's always been cannot be done any longer. And so we can figure things out if we just forget how we've always done it. Now that's easy to say, and it's really hard to do.
Yes.
But Dan, I'll give you some numbers. So we are the second largest district in the Bexar County area. But we being the staff here, rethought how to serve kids lunches and meals. We fed or provided over 3 million meals during that time.
Wow.
More than any district in the state. We figured out how to give them counseling support virtually. We figured out how to give them nursing support virtually. We were the first in this area to create virtual learning in Bexar County. And it was that mindset of what one of my chiefs now says, we failed forward. I said, look, nobody knows the right way. So we're going to fail. But if we look at it as failure, or we can look at it as failure or an opportunity to grow, which do we want to approach it? I think we look at it as an opportunity to grow. So we started doing things uniquely different. And it stood out. In fact, I spoke to the Commissioner of Education early on, and he told me we were the high functioning LEA, local education agency, in the area. And it was all because we didn't look at it from this mindset of, why is this happening to me? We looked at it as what a unique opportunity to do things different that we've always wanted to try, but for a variety of reasons, we couldn't. And so, we've learned a tremendous, how we onboard people now isn't about coming in person anymore. It's online. So now they can do it from home. We've moved some jobs to being at home, and it's accommodating families, and we have higher engaged employees and people that are happier. We found ways to deliver services in different types of ways. And then I think what we've done is see that maybe the old system wasn't as efficient. And so we're looking at, rather than, I'll give you an example off the cuff. We have all 7 languages at all of our comprehensive high schools. But the thing is, when you look at it, for instance, Latin, at some of our schools, there's a very low interest in it. But we've always said, no, we're going to offer all the choices. But what if, instead of giving them a Latin teacher, we say, hey, your child can still have Latin, but they're going to connect virtually to a teacher at another campus. And that's how they're going to learn. And then that FTE can be used for a different elective that your kids have a greater interest in. And that's where we're moving. And I don't think we ever would have gotten there. Well, I know we wouldn't have without COVID. So I said very early on in an interview with a local news station here that education has changed forever. And it has. We will never go backwards. Our calendar has changed. How we provide tutoring has changed. And I think for the better. And I think it focused on mental health, something that, Dan, as a superintendent, I made a priority day one. But I think it really put a spotlight on mental health, not just for students, but for our own employees. And that umbrella is a very large one. And it's mental health isn't what I think people depict. It's people that are smiling but are hurting on the inside, and they just don't show it. So,
well, that's fantastic. That's all that, and I couldn't agree more. Obviously, I was at Reagan when all of the COVID stuff hit in 2020, and I felt like the only way you could go about it as a leader of an organization was to talk about this idea that different doesn't mean worse, and how are we gonna find this not only to work now, but also have some outcomes that are actually better in the long run. And I think your examples are inspiring, and that's an incredible testament to your vision. And you talked about at the beginning, it's kind of like being a CEO. I always feel like a CEO's most important job is being a visionary, and that's exactly what you're talking about right now, and you're living that. So that's incredible, and I'm so happy that students and parents and staff and teachers are exposed to that and are able to sort of learn from you and watch you lead. So thank you.
Yeah, well, Dan, I'll just want to add this. So, look, I just set up an environment for it to happen. It's the people here that make it happen.
Sure. Yeah.
This, I will just tell you, as a leader, it is the most humbling thing, because you realize very quickly nothing gets done without the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
And so all I did was set up an environment where and I'll add this, what I always tell them is, we're going to use data, but it is a flashlight. It's never a hammer.
Yeah.
And so it is to shine a light on the things that we do well and areas that we can get a little bit better. And that's all it is. It's never about beating them. And that creates that environment to where they were able to respond in a time that was a very challenging, because I believe that, and what I've heard from them is there were no ramifications to failure other than this is an opportunity to grow.
Yeah. That's great. One last thing I want to ask you about. I heard a rumor that you talked about Happy Not Satisfied at convocation for teachers across the district. I would just love to hear, like, what was the context of that, and what were you kind of talking about it with?
Yeah, I was channeling my inner Dan Morrison.
I love it.
But Dan, so I'll tell you, I'm going to tell it through the lens of my daughter.
Sure.
Because as you know, she was in band dance with you for 3 years.
Yeah.
And, I really think that experience taught her so much and really brought her out of her shell. But I can remember the very first time you all went to a BOA competition, and you all won it hands down quite easily. And my daughter came home, and I said, she was telling us about it. And I said, that's awesome, honey. So, great. And she goes, well, Mr. Morrison said, be happy, not satisfied. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, talk to me about that. Like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, he wants us to celebrate it, but he focused us on, there are a few things that we could still do to get a little bit better. And if we're not getting better, everyone else is getting better around us, and they're going to beat us. So we constantly have to get better. So I used that, and I explain it through her lens, because that's how I approached Happy Not Satisfied. So again, we were tied for the 7th best large district when our accountability came out this year. And that was a huge celebration. But what I needed to do, Dan, and it was a balance, right, is I want to celebrate it with people, and I want them to feel good about it, because what they did with all the talk around the COVID slide and kids were so behind and the learning gaps, I mean, we are right back to where we were in 2019. And so that's incredible. But as I've been sharing with you all this time, but we're not there yet. So how was I going to share that with them without making them feel like I'm just not satisfied, right?
Sure.
So I told the story about you.
Yeah.
And how you used, and through my daughter's lens, about, even though you won, it was that piece of be happy, but don't be satisfied, because we can get, a little wee bit better. And so I rolled that in with my discussion about Lego and that 0.1 millimeter is, I think people look at successful people, to your point, that they were lucky or there's something special about them, right? That something magical happened. And I use the example of Thomas Edison. He failed 1,000 times to make the light bulb. And so anybody would give up. Thomas Edison, by the way, wasn't a genius. He was a regular, everyday guy like you and me. But see, he didn't look at it as 1,000 failures. He looked at it as 1,000 steps to creating the light bulb. He just reframed his thinking. And so my point with that Happy Not Satisfied is, you don't have, inventors and creative people aren't unique. There's nothing special about them. They're everyday people that just try to get 0.1 millimeter better every day. And that keeps them hungry and keeps them moving forward. So that's how I used it.
I love it. I appreciate the shout out, but that's you put your own touch on it, and it's amazing. That's super cool.
Well, I'm never going to take credit for something that was not mine to begin with. And since
you're a
very since you're a beloved band director, not only in this area but across this nation, I'm not going to steal your thunder. But hey, I want to tell you, thanks for the shirt. I love it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm going to wear it. I'm going to wear it and put it on and send you a picture.
Please do. I would be absolutely honored.
I love
if you did that. Yeah. And great plug. You can get the shirt on the Happy Not Satisfied website, anyone listening. So there you go. But no, this has been an amazing conversation, and just listening to you, it's truly inspiring. I mean, you embody Happy Not Satisfied. Every way you've talked about it is like, I relate to it. It's made me think about it in a different way. And it's kind of funny, like, the idea that happiness isn't a destination. I think it's really hard to wrap our minds around that. But once we do, then we finally kind of allow ourselves to enjoy every day. It's just like, oh, there's not this thing I have to wait to get to. It's like, no, you're never going to get there, but that's great. Like, let's just you go to bed feeling good about what you did while you're looking forward to what you get to get better at the next day, you know? So, yeah, I think this has been just so fantastic to talk to you. I know that like NEISD is on social media, right? Like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I don't know if there's anything else you want to plug or tell people about, but you're welcome to.
Oh yeah, no, we're on all the social media. I'm on Twitter.
Oh, great.
And so, yeah, no, we're out there, and I don't post a whole lot. I probably need to get a little bit better at that, 0.1 millimeter better.
There we go. Yeah.
But I've just been busy with other things. But
I can't imagine.
No, I mean, hey, look, and if you're a teacher and looking for a great place to work, even Forbes magazine says we're a great place. So we'd love to have you here in Northeast.
100%. And I can say from personal experience that is absolutely true. So anyone that's interested in learning more about Happy Not Satisfied, you can check us out on Instagram. It's at happy.notsatisfied. And as I said, the website, happynotsatisfied.com. We'd love to see you there. But Dr. Maika, it's great to see you. This has been an inspiring chat. I'm looking forward to sharing it with everybody. And hopefully I'll get a chance to talk to you again soon. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan. You take care.
Thank you.